The alien ship appeared over New York City on a Tuesday morning. It was massive, blocking out the sun like a floating mountain of metal and lights. People stopped on the streets, pointing upward with their phones raised. Within hours, every news channel showed the same image. A vessel 3 kilometers long, hovering silently above the United Nations building. Stood in the UN Assembly Hall, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his translator earpiece. He was only 28 years old, a junior diplomat from South Korea. He never imagined his first major assignment would be attending humanity's first contact with alien life. Ambassador sat beside him, her face calm despite the chaos around them. She was his supervisor, a veteran diplomat who had negotiated peace treaties between nations. But this was different. This was beyond anything humans had prepared for. The hall filled with world leaders, military commanders, and diplomats from every nation. Everyone wore the same expression, fear mixed with wonder. The lights dimmed, and a holographic projection appeared at the center of the room. The alien materialized in the light. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Its face had too many eyes, arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the words came through the translators in multiple languages at once. "I am commander of the Empire," the alien said. Its voice sounded like grinding metal. "We have come to bring your world into our civilization." Murmurs spread through the hall. Notice that didn't say invite or offer. The word was bring. "We have scanned your planet," continued. "You have no defense satellites, no weapons platforms in orbit, no ships capable of leaving your atmosphere for combat. Your world is defenseless." More holograms appeared, showing Earth from space. Red markers indicated areas the aliens had scanned. They had found military bases, yes, but to them, everything looked primitive. Tanks, jets, and aircraft carriers meant nothing to a species that traveled between stars. "We are not without mercy," said, and somehow the words sounded worse than a direct threat. "We offer you a choice. Submit to annexation within 72 hours, accept rule. In return, we will protect you and bring you technology." "And if we refuse?" asked the Secretary General, an elderly woman from Brazil. The hologram changed. It showed a planet green and blue like Earth. Then it showed the same planet burning. Cities turned to ash, oceans boiling, the surface cracked and lifeless. "This was 5, explained. "They refused our generous offer. We were forced to pacify them. It took 3 days. No one remained to refuse a second time." The hall erupted. Delegates shouted in anger. Military leaders demanded action, but saw the truth in their faces. They were terrified. Earth's most powerful weapons, its nuclear arsenal, meant nothing against ships that could cross the galaxy. Even if humanity launched every missile it had, the aliens would destroy them long before they reached their target. "You cannot win," said, silencing the room with those simple words. "You are children playing with sticks while adults stand at your door. We have conquered 47 star systems. Your world will be the 48th. The alien showed more holograms, massive fleets, weapons that could crack planets, armies of soldiers in armor that made them look like walking tanks. Each image drove home the same message: resistance was suicide. "You know nothing of war," said almost gently. "Your species has never faced true conflict. Submit peacefully and you will be spared." Something in those words made fear turn into something else. Anger, perhaps, or maybe just frustration at being dismissed so completely. He leaned toward. "Ambassador," he whispered, "may I speak?" Looked at him with surprise. Then she studied his face and must have seen something there because she nodded slowly. She raised her hand. "Commander," she called out, "my assistant has a question." The alien's multiple eyes focused on. He felt like an insect under a magnifying glass. But he stood anyway, his legs steadier than he expected. "You say we know nothing of war," said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "But have you studied our history?" "We scanned your databases," replied. "We know your history, tribal conflicts, small wars between primitive nations, nothing that compares to galactic warfare." "Then you didn't look closely enough," said. "You saw our current military and judged us weak, but you didn't ask why our planet looks the way it does. You didn't ask why we have so many borders, so many languages, so many different nations." "What does that matter?" asked. "It matters because we've been killing each other for 10,000 years, said quietly. "We've spent our entire history perfecting the art of war, not against aliens, against ourselves." Some delegates gasped. Others looked angry that would admit such a thing, but was smiling slightly, understanding what he was doing. "Commander," continued, "you want to know about human warfare. Give me 1 hour. Let me show you our history. Then you can make your judgment about whether we know anything about war." The alien was silent for a long moment. Then it made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "Very well, human, 1 hour. Entertain me with your primitive battles. Show me why I should fear a species that cannot even leave its own planet. When you are finished, my offer remains. Submit or burn." "Agreed," said. He looked at who was already pulling up files on her tablet. Around the room, other delegates began to understand what was happening. Historians, military experts, and researchers started sending data to display. He had 1 hour to convince an alien empire that humanity was not prey. 1 hour to show what humans were capable of when threatened. 1 hour to open a history book and let the dead speak for themselves. Walked to the central console and uploaded his first files. The holograms shifted, replacing images of the fleet with something else, something older, something human. "Let me tell you about war," said, and began the lesson. The first hologram showed a map of Earth from 800 years ago, zoomed in on a region of grasslands and mountains. The delegates leaned forward slightly, their interest casual, almost amused. "This is Asia in the year 1206, said. "A man named united various tribes in this region. History would remember him by a different name, Khan." "A tribal warlord," said dismissively. "Commander, is this your great example of human warfare, horsemen with crude weapons?" "Please wait," replied calmly. He advanced the timeline. The map changed, red spreading across the continents like spilled blood. By the time of his death 21 years later, Khan's empire stretched from Korea to Hungary. It was the largest continuous land empire in human history. New images appeared. Armies on horseback, thousands strong, moving with precision across vast distances. Cities burning, populations fleeing. "His armies killed approximately 40 million people," said. The number hung in the air. That was 11% of the entire human population at that time. 1 in every 9 people on Earth died because of this one man's ambition. The delegates stirred. Skin shifted to a darker shade. "The Mongols developed tactics we still study today," continued. A military historian named had joined him at the console, helping to pull up records. "They used psychological warfare, destroying one city completely to terrify 10 others into surrender. They pioneered the use of biological warfare, catapulting diseased corpses over city walls to spread plague. They organized their armies with communication systems that allowed coordination across thousands of kilometers." "Primitive logistics," said, but the dismissal sounded weaker now. "Perhaps," agreed, "but effective. They conquered more territory in 25 years than the Roman Empire did in 400, and they did it with horses and bows." He changed the display. Now it showed Europe centuries later. "This is the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. Humans fought over religion, over which version of the same God was correct. 8 million people died. The population of Central Europe dropped by 30% in some regions. Soldiers destroyed farmland deliberately, starving civilians. Mercenary armies wandered the countryside, killing for pay. When it ended, over 20,000 villages had been abandoned or destroyed. Spoke up, his voice flat and professional. He was a military historian who had lost family in recent conflicts. His ability to recite these facts without emotion made them more chilling. The war introduced new weapons technology, said. Better gunpowder, more efficient cannons. Armies grew from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. Logistics became a science. Nations learned to sustain warfare for decades at a time. More images flowed across the displays. Battles from every continent. Chinese wars that lasted generations. European conflicts over succession and territory. African kingdoms rising and falling. American civilizations destroying each other before Europeans ever arrived. "Do you see the pattern?" asked the delegation. "We didn't just fight, we improved. Every war taught us new ways to kill more efficiently. Every peace was just preparation for the next conflict." He showed them the Great Wall of China, built over centuries to keep out invaders. The Roman legions, organized with military precision that wouldn't be matched for 1,000 years. The elaborate fortifications of medieval castles, designed to withstand months-long sieges. "We built our entire civilizations around war," said. "Our architecture, our technology, our social structures. Everything was shaped by the assumption that someone would try to kill us, and we needed to be ready." An officer raised one of its four hands. "But these are historical conflicts, ancient barbarism. Surely modern humanity has evolved beyond such violence." Smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's what I would have thought too, but the numbers tell a different story." He pulled up statistics, wars per century, deaths per conflict. The progression was clear and terrible. As humanity developed better technology, the death tolls grew. In the Warring States period of China, from 475 to 221 BCE, armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. There are records of single battles where 100,000 soldiers died in one day, not over months of campaign. One day. Images showed ancient battlefield remains, mass graves discovered by archaeologists. Thousands of skeletons, many showing signs of violent death. Added context, her voice steady. "Commander, you must understand something about humans. We are not naturally peaceful beings who occasionally fight. We are naturally violent beings who occasionally make peace. The difference is important." "That cannot be true," another delegate said. "Your cities are peaceful now. Your people live normal lives." "Because we learned," replied. "We learned that unrestricted warfare destroys everything. But that knowledge came at a cost measured in millions of lives over thousands of years." Brought up more examples. The systematic destruction of Carthage by Rome, where the city was burned and the land salted so nothing would grow. The Crusades, where religious fervor sent armies across continents for 200 years. The 100 Years' War between England and France, which actually lasted 116 years. "We named a war after how long it lasted," pointed out. "A century of conflict was so common we gave it a casual name." Pulled up detailed tactical analyses. Human warfare evolved through these conflicts. We developed combined arms tactics, using infantry, cavalry, and artillery together. We learned siege warfare, naval warfare, and guerrilla tactics. We studied logistics, supply lines, and strategic planning. We turned war into an academic discipline. "We wrote books about it," added. "Thousands of books. The Art of War by Sun, written 2,500 years ago, is still studied in our military academies today. We preserved knowledge of how to wage war more carefully than almost any other knowledge." The delegates were no longer leaning back in casual confidence. They watched the display with focused attention, their skin colors shifting in patterns that suggested unease. Spoke, and now there was an edge to the grinding voice. "These are pre-industrial conflicts, primitive by any galactic standard. Your species lacked the technology for true destruction." "You're right," said. These are primitive. These are us fighting with swords and horses and simple gunpowder. These are the wars we fought when we were barely organized into nations." He paused, letting the silence build. "And in these primitive wars, we killed hundreds of millions of each other. We depopulated entire regions. We destroyed civilizations so thoroughly that we forgot their names. And we did it without computers, without flight, without any technology beyond what we could forge in a blacksmith's shop." Looked directly at. "Commander, you said we know nothing of war because we haven't fought between planets, but I need you to understand something. We spent thousands of years fighting for cities, for valleys, for rivers and mountain passes. We made war over pieces of land so small you could walk across them in a day, and we killed millions doing it." He advanced the timeline forward, stopping at the year 1914. "Now let me show you what happened when we added industrial technology to that history," said quietly. "Let me show you what humans do when we have machines to help us kill each other." The hologram changed, and the delegates went very still. The hologram showed a muddy field somewhere in Europe. Trenches stretched for kilometers, zigzagging across the landscape like scars. Men in uniforms huddled in the mud, waiting. "This is the Western Front in 1916, said. "The First World War. We call it that because we had to number them." Shifted, "How many of these world wars have you had?" "Two major ones," replied, "so far." The hologram animated, showing an attack. Thousands of soldiers climbed out of trenches and ran across open ground. Machine guns opened fire. Men fell in waves, their bodies piling up in the mud. Those who survived reached the enemy trenches, only to face more gunfire, grenades, and bayonets. In one day, at the Battle of the Somme, the British Army suffered 60,000 casualties, said. 20,000 dead in one day. The battle lasted 4 months and killed over 1 million people. At the end, the front line had moved less than 10 kilometers. An officer made a sound of disbelief. They continued fighting after such losses. "They fought for 4 more years, answered. He brought up more statistics. The First World War lasted from 1914 to 1918. 20 million people died. 21 million were wounded. Entire generations of young men were wiped out. Some villages in Europe lost every male between the ages of 18 and 40. The hologram showed new horrors, soldiers choking in green fog. "This is chlorine gas," explained. "We developed chemical weapons to break the stalemate. When one side used gas, the other side developed better gas. Then both sides developed masks. Then both sides developed gas that could penetrate the masks. Back and forth, each side trying to find more efficient ways to kill." More images appeared. Tanks rolling across battlefields, aircraft in dogfights above the clouds, submarines hunting ships in the ocean. "We invented new technology specifically for this war," said. "Aircraft went from experimental toys to weapons in just a few years. We put machine guns on them and fought in the sky. We built tanks to cross trenches. We developed submarines that could sink ships from below." An engineer named stepped forward with technical readouts. The weapons development was exponential. In 1914, machine guns could fire 400 rounds per minute. By 1918, we had weapons that fired 1,000 rounds per minute. Artillery improved from simple cannons to precise instruments that could hit targets kilometers away. "And after all this death," said quietly, "after 20 million people died, the peace treaty was written so poorly that it guaranteed another war." The hologram jumped forward to 1939. Now it showed a different kind of warfare, tanks moving in coordinated groups, aircraft bombing cities, entire populations caught in the fighting. "The Second World War," said. The weight in his voice made several human delegates look away. "This one killed 85 million people." The number hung in the air like a physical thing, even seemed stunned into silence. 3% of the world's entire population, continued. Dead in 6 years. not over territory, not over resources, over ideology and power. The hologram showed city after city in flames. London burning under German bombs. German cities reduced to rubble by Allied bombing. The siege of Leningrad, where 1 million people starved or froze to death while 2 armies fought over their city. We developed strategic bombing, explained, her voice shaking slightly. The deliberate targeting of civilian populations to break enemy morale. We created firestorms that consumed entire cities. In Dresden, in Hamburg, in Tokyo, fires burned so hot that they created their own weather systems. Winds from the heat would pull people into the flames. A journalist named joined them carrying a tablet. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. Began reading testimonies from survivors. Her voice was quiet but clear, and the UN chamber had gone completely silent. She read about children separated from parents in the chaos, about civilians machine-gunned as they fled, about cities where no building stood higher than broken walls. Tears ran down her face as she read, but her voice never broke. In the delegation, several aliens had turned colors that suggested distress. "The Holocaust," said, and the hologram showed something worse than battles. Systematic genocide. We built factories for murder, camps where we transported millions of people for the specific purpose of killing them. 6 million Jews died, 5 million others. We industrialized death. The holograms showed the camps, the gas chambers disguised as showers, the mass graves, the watched in what could only be described as horror. "This is impossible," an officer said. "No species does this to itself." "We did," said simply. And those who did it were not monsters. They were ordinary people, soldiers following orders, citizens who looked away, bureaucrats processing paperwork. That's what makes it truly terrifying. Anyone can become capable of this under the right conditions. Brought up the final images of the Second World War. 2 cities, before and after. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, transformed from populated urban centers to flattened wastelands in seconds. "We split the atom," he said. "We learned to release the power that holds matter together, and the first thing we did with that knowledge was weaponize it." The hologram showed the mushroom cloud, the shockwave that flattened buildings, the heat that vaporized people instantly, the radiation that killed slowly over days and weeks. "One bomb," said, "one city, 80,000 dead instantly in Hiroshima, 40,000 in Nagasaki. Thousands more died later from radiation poisoning." Stood abruptly. "This is a lie. No species develops such weapons for use on their own planet. The risk of extinction is too high." "It's not a lie," said coldly. "We have photographs, video recordings, survivor testimony, physical evidence. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on cities full of civilians because we calculated it would end the war faster than a conventional invasion." "And it worked," added. "Japan surrendered days later. We killed 200,000 people and called it a strategic success." The delegation was standing now, their skin colors shifting rapidly. Some were backing away from the holograms as if the images themselves were dangerous. "After the war ended," continued relentlessly, "we looked at the atomic bomb and thought it wasn't powerful enough. So we built the hydrogen bomb, 1,000 times more powerful. We built weapons that could destroy entire countries, weapons that could end all human life on Earth." "Madness," said, "suicidal madness." "Yes," agreed. "We called it mutually assured destruction. Mad. Both sides had enough weapons to destroy each other completely. Both sides knew that starting a war meant dying. So we built more weapons anyway just to be sure. At our peak, we had 60,000 nuclear warheads, enough to kill everyone on Earth several times over." He paused, letting that sink in. "Commander, you said we know nothing of war. You said we are children playing with sticks, but I need you to understand something. These wars, these weapons, these deaths, this is what we did to ourselves. This is us fighting each other over pieces of one small planet." Advance the timeline one more time. And that was just the first half of the 20th century, he said quietly. We still have 80 more years to cover. Would you like to hear about our modern conflicts, our current weapons? Because, Commander, I promise you, we didn't stop improving our ability to kill. The hologram shifted to show a map of Earth divided by a red line. On one side, nations marked in blue. On the other, nations marked in red. After the Second World War ended, we immediately prepared for a third one, said. We called it the Cold War because we never fought directly. Instead, we pointed nuclear missiles at each other for 45 years. A nuclear physicist stepped forward. He looked tired, as if carrying the weight of what he was about to explain. At the height of the Cold War, the United States had 32,000 nuclear warheads, said. The Soviet Union had 45,000. Between them, enough firepower to make Earth uninhabitable, and both sides kept them on high alert, ready to launch within minutes. The hologram showed missile silos hidden in farmland, submarines lurking beneath the ocean, bombers flying constant patrols, ready to strike at any moment. We developed a strategy called mutually assured destruction, continued. If one side launched nuclear weapons, the other side would launch theirs before the first missiles hit. Both sides would be destroyed. Everyone knew this, and both sides built more weapons anyway. That makes no tactical sense, said, but the commander's voice had lost its confident edge. It makes perfect sense if you understand humans, replied. We don't calculate odds like you do. We calculate based on fear and pride. If our enemy has weapons, we need more weapons. If they build 10 missiles, we build 20. It's not logical, it's emotional, and it's incredibly dangerous. The hologram showed proxy wars across the globe. Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Angola, Nicaragua. Nations caught between the superpowers, their lands becoming. We couldn't fight each other directly without ending the world, explained. So we fought through smaller nations. We tested weapons and tactics on them. We trained armies, supplied weapons, and watched from a distance as people died. Vietnam alone killed 3 million people. Brought up tactical analyses. This is where modern warfare developed. Guerrilla tactics, insurgency, asymmetric warfare. We learned to fight enemies who had better technology by adapting. Vietnamese fighters defeated the most powerful military on Earth using tunnels, traps, and determination. They won, an officer asked, surprised. They won, confirmed. Not because they had better weapons, because they refused to surrender, because they were willing to fight for decades, because every village destroyed created more fighters. The United States had bombs, helicopters, and millions of soldiers. Vietnam had people willing to die for their land. The people won. The hologram showed more conflicts. The Middle East, where wars had continued for decades. Africa, torn apart by civil wars and genocide. South America, where governments rose and fell in violence. Terror attacks that killed thousands in single strikes. We developed new weapons for these conflicts, said, bringing up technical specifications. Precision-guided missiles that could strike targets from hundreds of kilometers away. Drones that could kill people on the other side of the world, controlled by someone sitting in an office. Cyber weapons that could shut down entire nations without firing a shot. We made war invisible, added. She had been quietly documenting everything. A missile launched from a ship at sea could hit a target in a landlocked country. A computer virus could destroy centrifuges in a nuclear facility. A drone strike could eliminate a target while they slept. War became something you could wage from safety, which made it easier to wage constantly. Pulled up current statistics. Right now, today, there are active conflicts in 42 regions of Earth. Some have lasted decades. We have become so good at war that we can sustain dozens of them simultaneously while most of our population lives in peace. But you still have nuclear weapons, asked. 13,000 of them, answered. Fewer than the Cold War, but each one more powerful. Modern nuclear weapons make the Hiroshima bomb look like a firecracker. We have missiles that can carry multiple warheads, each striking different targets. We have bombs that can destroy entire metropolitan areas, and we keep them ready to launch at all times. The hologram showed a map of Earth with red dots marking weapons locations. The delegation stared at the display and suddenly changed the image. "But Commander, you said we were defenseless. You said your scans showed no orbital weapons, no space military. You thought Earth was an easy target." He nodded to a security officer named, who had been waiting quietly by the door, approached the central console and entered a security code. The hologram transformed. New layers appeared on the display, showing things that hadn't been visible before. "What is this?" demanded. "This is what your scans missed," said. He was military intelligence and his voice carried absolute certainty. "Nuclear submarines hidden in ocean depths below your sensor range. We have 14 of them, each carrying 24 ballistic missiles. They move constantly and you can't track them." More markers appeared on the display. Underground missile silos, hardened against attack. 700 of them, scattered across 3 continents. Surface-to-air missiles that can reach low orbit. Installations still officially listed as experimental but fully functional. Directed energy weapons that your scans interpreted as communications equipment. The space around Earth suddenly showed hundreds of objects that hadn't been visible before. "Stealth satellites," continued. "Some are communications, some are weapons platforms, some are decoys. You can't tell which is which because we designed them specifically to avoid detection. The radar signature you saw as space debris, half of it is actually weapons." Skin had turned a pale, sickly color. "This is impossible. Our scans are thorough." "Your scans are designed to find technology like yours," interjected. "We designed our military specifically to hide from advanced sensors. We assumed that any alien species would have better technology than us, so we developed stealth as our primary defense." Added more technical details. "We have particle beam weapons, electromagnetic pulse devices, and kinetic bombardment systems. We have biological and chemical weapons stockpiled despite international treaties banning them. We have autonomous AI-controlled defense systems that don't require human input to respond to threats. We have contingency plans," said, pulling up document after document. "Operation Scorched Earth. If an invasion is inevitable, we destroy our own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy. Operation Black Winter. If we're losing, we trigger a nuclear winter to make the planet worthless to conquerors. Operation Final Hour. If all else fails, we have dead man switches that will launch everything we have at the enemy fleet, even if every human on Earth is already dead." The delegation was backing away from the console now. Their confident posture had completely collapsed. "You would destroy your own world rather than surrender it?" asked. "We've done it before," said softly. "In the Second World War, the Soviet Union burned their own cities and farmland as they retreated, denying resources to the German army. We call it scorched earth tactics. We would rather live on a burned planet than surrender it intact to conquerors." Pulled up one final set of data. "Commander, you asked about our capacity for war. Let me give you numbers. Earth's combined military personnel, 30 million active soldiers. Reserve forces, 70 million. That's 100 million people trained to fight. Our industrial capacity can produce aircraft, tanks, and weapons faster than you can destroy them. Our population of 8 billion means that even if you kill 90% of us, 800 million humans will still be fighting." He met multiple eyes directly. "You've conquered 47 star systems, and I believe you, but I need you to understand what makes Earth different. Every species you conquered had space travel. They had advanced technology. They understood the math of warfare in space. They surrendered when they calculated they couldn't win." His voice grew quieter, more intense. "We don't have space fleets. We don't have energy shields. We're primitives, just like you said. But we're primitives who spent 10,000 years learning how to fight enemies stronger than us. We're primitives who developed nuclear weapons before we developed space travel because killing each other was more important than reaching the stars. We're primitives who would rather burn our world than give it to you. The room was absolutely silent. Commander said, "We don't know if we can defeat your fleet. Honestly, we probably can't. But we can make conquering Earth cost you so much that it won't be worth it. We can fight for years, decades if necessary. We can make every city a fortress and every human a soldier. And if we're losing, we can make sure you inherit a radioactive wasteland instead of a living world." He paused. "So tell me, Commander, do you still think Earth is defenseless?" 3 days passed. The deadline came and went, but the fleet did not advance. It stayed in orbit, silent and waiting, while Earth held its breath. Spent those days in the UN building, watching reports from around the world. Some nations had mobilized their militaries. Others had evacuated cities. People stockpiled food and water, preparing for war. But mostly, people just waited. On the fourth day, Commander requested another meeting. The same delegates gathered in the assembly hall. But this time, the atmosphere was different. They entered quietly, their skin colors muted and shifting in patterns that had learned indicated distress. Stood at the center of the room, and the alien looked smaller somehow, less confident. "I have spent 3 days running simulations," began. "My war computers have analyzed every scenario for conquering Earth. The results are consistent." The commander brought up a holographic display. It showed fleet movements, casualty projections, and resource calculations. Red numbers dominated the screen. "In the most optimistic scenario, where we achieve orbital superiority within hours, our ground invasion would take 3 years. Our casualties would be 42% of our invasion force. The economic cost would exceed the value of acquiring Earth by a factor of 7. More numbers appeared, each projection worse than the last. "In realistic scenarios, accounting for your hidden weapons and defensive capabilities, our casualties rise to 60%. The war would last a decade or more. Our fleet would be damaged beyond repair. And there is a 17% probability that you would trigger a nuclear winter, rendering the planet useless." Paused, and when the alien spoke again, there was something in the voice that sounded like respect. "But the most disturbing finding is this. Even in simulations where we achieve complete military victory, pacifying the population appears impossible. The psychological profiles suggest humans would continue guerrilla warfare indefinitely. Every city would become a battlefield. Every civilian a potential combatant. The occupation would never end." A human general from China spoke up. "Did your simulations account for kamikaze tactics?" "Explain," said. "In our Second World War, Japanese pilots deliberately crashed aircraft loaded with explosives into enemy ships. They called themselves kamikaze, divine wind. They died by the thousands. That's just one example. Throughout history, humans have used suicide attacks when we believed the cause was worth dying for." "Your computer probably didn't account for that," added. "How do you calculate the behavior of people who are willing to die to kill your soldiers? How do you occupy a population when anyone you meet might be carrying a bomb?" Skin shifted through several colors rapidly. The simulations attempted to account for such variables. The conclusion was clear. Humans would accept any cost to resist occupation. You would fight until your population dropped below sustainable levels. And then the survivors would still fight. "Yes," said simply, "we would." The commander was silent for a long moment. Then did something hadn't expected. The alien bowed, a gesture remarkably similar to a human bow. "I underestimated you," said. "I looked at your technology and saw primitives. I should have looked at your history and seen survivors. You didn't develop advanced technology because you were too busy fighting each other. That's not weakness. That's terrifying." Another officer stepped forward. In our empire, wars end when one side accepts defeat. We fight until the victor is clear, then the loser surrenders. It's logical. It preserves both civilizations. But you don't surrender, the officer continued. Your history shows you fight when outnumbered. You fight when defeat is certain. You fight until you win or until everyone dies. That's not logical. That's madness. It's human, said. She had been recording everything, and now she spoke directly to the delegates. You're right, it is madness, we know that. We've written countless books and films about the horror of war. We teach our children that war is evil. And yet, when threatened, we go to war anyway, because there are things we consider more important than survival. Like what? Asked. Freedom, answered. Pride, revenge, justice, the right to choose our own fate. These things matter more to humans than life itself. We would rather die free than live as slaves. Turn to face the human delegation directly. Then I must revise my offer. The Empire cannot conquer Earth. The cost is too high, but I can offer something else. The alien brought up a new document, displayed in multiple languages. A treaty, explained. Earth remains independent. We recognize your sovereignty. We establish formal diplomatic relations. We do not interfere with your world. In exchange, asked carefully. 3 conditions. First, you do not expand militarily into space. Second, you share certain defensive technologies with us. Third, you allow us to establish an embassy on Earth for cultural exchange. You want our military technology, a Russian general asked with disbelief. Your stealth systems, confirmed. Your ability to hide military assets from advanced sensors. It's crude compared to our technology in many ways, but it's effective. We have enemies who would benefit from knowing such techniques exist. And honestly, we need to ensure our other territories have defenses against similar tactics. She looked at the other human delegates. Quiet conversations happened across the room. Finally, the Secretary General stood. We need time to discuss this among ourselves. But speaking personally, Commander, I find your offer reasonable. More than reasonable. Take the time you need, said. My fleet will remain in orbit, but we will move to a higher altitude to reduce tensions. I will await your response. The delegation prepared to leave, but before they transported back to their ship, approached directly. You taught me something, human, the commander said. I have studied war for 200 years. I have commanded fleets in 30 campaigns, but I never understood what you showed me today. What's that? Asked. That technology is not what makes a species dangerous. Will is what makes a species dangerous. You have primitive weapons, yes, but you have the will to use them without hesitation. You have the will to sacrifice everything. That makes you more dangerous than species with weapons 1,000 times more advanced. Paused, then added, the other worlds we conquered were more advanced than Earth. They had space fleets, energy shields, weapons we struggled to counter. But when we defeated their militaries, they surrendered. Because they calculated they could not win, and they chose to survive under our rule rather than die resisting. That's logical, said. Yes, but you are not logical. If we had destroyed your military, you would have fought with civilian weapons. If we had taken your cities, you would have fought from the wilderness. If we had occupied your entire planet, you would have poisoned our food, sabotaged our equipment, and killed our soldiers in their sleep. You would fight for generations until either we left or you were extinct. The alien skin shifted to a deep, respectful blue. I have never encountered a species that would choose extinction over surrender. I hope I never encounter another. With that, and the delegation teleported away, leaving the humans alone in the assembly hall. For a moment nobody spoke, then laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. We did it, she said. We actually did it. We threatened to commit species suicide, a delegate from Germany pointed out, and they believed us. Because it's true, said quietly. If they had attacked, we would have done exactly what we said, scorched earth, nuclear winter, fighting until the last human died. I know, the German delegate replied. That's what frightens me. Was already preparing her broadcast. The galaxy needs to know about this, about what happened here, about how humanity earned its place among the stars. By being too crazy to conquer, asked. By being too stubborn to surrender, corrected. There's a difference. 3 months later, stood in his new office. He had been promoted to lead Earth's first interstellar diplomatic corps. The office had a window overlooking the city, now peaceful again. The fleet had departed 2 weeks earlier, leaving behind a small embassy staff and a formal treaty. On his desk sat the history book he had used during his presentation. It was old, worn, with pages marked and notes in the margins. He hadn't put it away. Instead, he'd placed it on a shelf where it was visible during all his video conferences with alien species. The title read simply, Human Conflict, A Complete History. Entered his office, carrying a tablet. You should see this. The Empire has updated their first contact protocols. They're now requiring all ships to study the target species' history before making any demands. Good, said. Maybe it will prevent other species from making a mistake. There's more. Other alien civilizations have started asking for copies of human history. They want to understand us. Some are frightened, some are curious, some are impressed. And some probably think we're insane, added. Those are the smart ones, agreed with a slight smile. Looked out the window at the city below. Millions of people going about their lives, unaware of how close they had come to extinction, unaware that their survival depended on convincing aliens that humans were too dangerous to fight. Do you think we would have really done it? Asked quietly. If they had attacked, would we have triggered the nuclear winter, destroyed our own world? Thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about the history book on his shelf, about 10,000 years of human warfare, about all the times throughout history when humans had chosen death over surrender. Yes, he finally said, without hesitation, because that's who we are. Nodded slowly. Then maybe was right. Maybe we are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. No, corrected. We're the most determined. There's a difference. Dangerous species seek to harm others. We only become dangerous when threatened. The rest of the time, we're actually quite peaceful. Try telling that to anyone who's read our history, said with dark humor. I did, replied. That's why they left. He turned back to his desk, where new messages were arriving from alien civilizations across the galaxy. First contact requests, trade negotiations, cultural exchanges. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe had learned an important lesson. Never assume a species without space weapons is helpless. Some species spent becoming dangerous to themselves first, and those species, when finally reaching the stars, carry that history with them like armor. In his message queue, noticed one from Commander. He opened it. Ambassador, it read, I have recommended Earth for membership in the Galactic Council, not because of your technology, but because of your resilience. The galaxy needs voices that understand the true cost of war, voices that have paid that cost repeatedly and survived. Welcome to the stars. Try not to terrify anyone else. Smiled and began composing his reply. Earth had entered the galactic community not as conquerors, not as victims, but as equals. And all it had taken was opening a history book and saying, "Want me to tell you about war?" The answer, it turned out, was enough.